Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 10 buffs and 10 nerfs which you want to see with the next set of balance changes. These are going to be 10 buffs to the 10 worst brawlers in the game, and of course 10 nerfs to the best brawlers inside of the game. So just a quick disclaimer, there's not going to be any balance changes this week because World Finals are going on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, so make sure to subscribe for that because I'm going to give you guys a bunch of tips on how to get all the predictions right and get a bunch of star drops and hypercharges. But anyways, we're going to be jumping into some balance changes which I think that desperately need to happen in probably a week or so time. So start off, of course, with the buffs with some of the worst brawlers in the game. So start off with Frank. Frank has been the worst brawler in the game, or one of them, for a very long time now. And for me, I think it's pretty clear that the dev team are probably looking to rework Frank in some shape of form, because for me, he just doesn't fit into the game right now. The fact that you have to stand still to attack just doesn't really sit right with me. We've seen some other reworks in the past to kind of mechanics like this, for like Jackie's super, for example. So I'm hoping there's some big rework for Frank coming soon. But for now, I'll just like some small buff to him. So I know it might be a little bit controversial, but just a small buff to his range. Right now, his attack range is 6 tiles and his super range is 7. So why not just buff it by like 0.33 tiles? It won't break him, but it'll make him much stronger. And if you guys remember back in beta days in 2018, he was actually buffed quite a lot in his attack range and it completely broke him. So I don't want to go back to that stage, but of course I want a little bit of love for Frank. So next up, we have some buffs to Doug, hopefully. I mean, for me, I'll just personally delete him. I don't know, I've just kind of forgotten about Doug, and he's just one of the worst brawlers that's ever been released. Doesn't really fit into the game. There needs to be some big changes. I mean, maybe they're going to rework Doug as well, because they're not really looking to buff him in many ways. For me, I think it's quite simple for now. I think just buffing his radius might be a little bit helpful, because he has no range to him. He has no ways to close the gap to the opponents. Of course, he's a healer, so he doesn't really need that, but he needs some extra range because he's never going to be able to even heal his teammates, forget deal damage to the opponents. So next up, we have some buffs hopefully to Hank. So Hank's been a very problematic brawler in the game. He used to be the most broken brawler on release, and then he's one of the worst brawlers easily in the game right now. So of course, you got to be careful with Hank, because in the right map with unbreakable walls or just any walls, he can be very toxic. So for me, I'm actually unsure on what to do, because it seems very clear that they don't want to revert the change. The fact that you used to be able to heal up when you used to charge your bubble. Of course, that's a little bit of a toxic mechanic to have, but at the same time, in his current state, he's just terrible. The fact that you have to wait so many seconds after your bubble bursted, for me, it just feels a little bit awkward. Something needs to happen with Hank, and I'm quite unsure how to tackle it. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Edgar. I mean, I don't really want him to be buffed, but a lot of the community do, because he's in a really bad spot at the moment. It's pretty hard to really know true ways to buff Edgar without reworking him, but for me, it seems to keep adding extra HP to him. I'd actually like to see some small buffs to maybe his kit, maybe adding another mythic gear onto Edgar. That might be a little bit for the end game players, so it won't break the lower trophy range for sure, or just a little bit of love to maybe his Fistic of star power, because for me, he just gets killed way too easily and it's so easy to predict. So next up on a buff wish list, we have Bo. So Bo is a little bit of a weird one, because it's quite clear that his kit overall needs a buff, but at the same time, I don't want him to be this gadget dependent brawler that he has been quite a lot of the time in the past. His tripwire gadget used to be very broken, same with his super totem. So for me, you probably want to leave that for now, maybe, even though his super totem is pretty useless. I'll probably just look at, I know it's very boring, but just a damage buff, because previously in the past, when he's received a damage buff, he started to rise very high in the meta. So just a small buff to his damage would be pretty nice. So next up on the buff wish list, we have BB. So BB has been trashed for a very long time now. As metas are kind of developed, normally the way that they buff BB is just by a simple HP buff, which we could definitely go down that route. But for me, I would actually like to see the super to be a little bit better with BB. Again, people might disagree because it can be very toxic in a confined spot, but just some extra damage, just so you can look to snipe people a little bit more with that super. Or we could just go it the other way and actually buff the super charge rate from super. So right now, I think you need to hit the opponent 4 times with a bubble to get another super. Maybe just making it 3 hits instead might be a little bit more fun with BB, because she needs something, right? Because she's just so easy to counter. So next up on the buff wish list, I have Chester. So Chester's a problematic brawler as well, because he used to be the best brawler inside of the game with the absurd amount of damage he used to deal, and also his stun super used to be very broken. But I'd like to see some more love to Chester, even though he's not really fair in the competitive scene because he's very unpredictable. I'd like a few changes. So the first one is a little bit obvious. I think Sneak Peek needs a drastic rework. It needs one, right? Ever since Chester's release, it's just never been used. So a complete rework, another new star power might actually make Chester a little bit more appealing to play. But not only that, I'd like to change for supercharge rate. So why, you might ask? For me, I don't think any of his supers are that strong. Like, they're pretty good and very useful, but not very strong. So it takes 7 hits for him to get super. So just decreasing this to 6 hits might make him a little bit more viable to play, especially against tougher matchups, because it's very hard to actually charge your super when you're actually in this meta. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Janet. So she's been a terrible brawler for a little while now. She used to be the best brawler in the game, or one of them, for a very long time. I think a lot of nerfs weren't really needed. They're very harsh with her. So I think just changing one of these nerfs would be pretty nice. So right now she takes 7 hits to get super. I would like for this just to get changed to 6, because it's just so easy to close her down and get a free kill, because of course she deals no damage. And a lot of times you can just ignore her. So for me, just decreasing it to 6 hits makes it so at least she's a little bit less vulnerable. So next up on the buff wish list, we have Surge. So Surge, I think, has completely fell off in the competitive meta. One of the worst brawlers right now in competitive. So for me, I think there's a few reasons for this. He's just so easy to pick on in terms of when he's at that first stage. And I know he's been a very toxic gadget brawler in the past, so I don't know whether buffing any of his gadgets would be the right way to actually balance him. I think for now, just giving him some extra HP or damage would be enough to maybe push him towards the B or even C tier. For me, right now, he's too squishy, so probably around 6,000 HP would sound pretty nice. Okay, so jumping into the final brawler I want to buff with, it is with Gus. So recently received a nerf to his Cookie Popper gadget, which I think wasn't necessarily needed because he already was dropping down in the meta, but I think it's a good opportunity to rebalance his kit overall, because let's face it, Cookie Popper was very strong and he was a very gadget dependent brawler. So now I would like some reworks, of course, to his other gadgets and star powers which have never been used in competitive. So the first one with Soul Switcher, his gadget, I think there's just no need for it to just decrease in any HP and actually make the healing of the spirit increase by like 150% or 200%, because you know, Gus is supposed to be a support brawler, right? He's supposed to, when he was first introduced in Brawl Talk, people thought he would be like this cool healer with all these ghosts around the field, but it doesn't feel like that. His ghosts are only used to deal damage, so hopefully buffing his healing might be pretty good. Also with his health bonanza star power as well, I think buffing this to 150%, 200% might make Gus feel a lot more appealing in terms of the support category. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the nerfs, starting off with the best brawler in the game by far. It is Charlie. So this is a painful subject because she's very broken right now, like insanely broken. There's multiple ways that you could nerf her. So the first one, I think definitely you need to nerf her spiders. It's too much HP. The fact that you can have 4 gadgets of this is just so toxic. Yeah, as I said, nerf the HP or nerf the amount of spiders that you can actually put out. It's just absurd to me. It creates so much pressure. And then of course, I think the big one that people don't really talk about too much is actually how easy her super is to hit. When you compare it to other brawlers that have a really strong super, like Willow's for example, like Charlie's just so easy to snipe across the map. It's just way too toxic. And again, another one that people don't really talk about is just how fast that you can spam out her attack. I think it's way too strong. Of course, you could mechanically change this so the auto aim has a little bit of a input delay, kind of like how Carl's pickaxe was changed, or you could just quite simply nerf the damage. There's a lot of things that you could do with Charlie, and she desperately needs it. She's completely busted. So next up, hopefully on the nerf list, we have Cordelius. So people have been underrating him still, and trust me, once you watch the World Finals, you realize how broken this brawler is. So with Cordelius, I feel like you got to be a little bit careful, because I think quite easily he could drop down the rankings quickly because he has very limited range. I think the big thing that needs to be addressed though is his super. It's just so incredibly strong, so maybe nerfing his super charge rate could be a nice way so he isn't able to cycle his super like crazy. Right now it can take 4 hits and a little bit of automatic supercharging for it to be built up. I think increasing this to like 5, maybe even 6 hits could be a nice way to balance out Cordelia's. So next up on the nerf wish list, we have a Lou and his hypercharge. So with Lou, without his hypercharge, he's a very balanced brawler, if not on the weaker side, but with it, it makes him one of the best brawlers in the game easily. So it's quite clear that his hypercharge in particular needs addressing. I don't think anything around his kit really needs too much of a change. So to do with his hypercharge, I don't know, he literally changing what it's set out to be, right? It instantly freezes with his next super, maybe just making it so it's like they're frozen 95% or something like that, or I just don't know. It's pretty hard to balance his hypercharge. Let me know down in the comment section below, because seriously, I'm stuck on this one. So next up, hopefully on the nerf wish list, we have Buster, and for me it's pretty simple. I've been saying for the longest time, slow-mo replay is a big outlier in a sense that there's only a few gadgets in the game which I definitely recommend getting every single time. Flying hook, for example, and slow-mo replay, it's just way too strong. I think the main reason why it's so strong is because it actually, like, Buster's range is actually pretty good, so he's able to pull people in quite easily. I don't know, maybe like decrease the pulling effect, you know, remove the slow. There's multiple things you can do with this, but slow-mo replay 1,000,000% needs a nerf. Next up, hopefully on the nerf wish list, we have Nanny. So she used to be a very bad brawler for a very long time, and now only for like 4 months or so she's at the top of the meta. So unfortunately, I'd like to see a small nerf to her. Of course, I don't want to completely revert the damage buff which she received. I think it was around 9% that she received, which I didn't think would have broken her, but it really has. On knockout and bounty, she's just way too strong. So I think hopefully there can be a nice in-between from the previous amount of damage she used to deal and the damage she deals now, and she might actually land in a decent spot. The next up on the nerf wish list, we have a Rosa. So Rosa has just completely taken over the meta since they added the tank trait to her. So I think a nice way to balance this out again is touching her super charge rate. So right now it takes, I believe, 9 punches to charge up her super. Just simply make it take 10 punches. So it's not the biggest of differences, but I think it'll help balance out things, and it might push her down from the S tier and not be as toxic. So next up on the nerf wish list, we have Spike. So I don't actually really want Spike to get nerfed. I think he's in a decent spot right now. His hypercharge is pretty good, but not really too toxic. So if you was to change anything about Spike, I would like maybe the radius of the supercharge, but the hypercharge to be maybe like 15% instead of a 20% increase, or the mythic gear. The mythic gear is a big problem. It is very, very strong. So right now it slows 50% more effectively, maybe around 40%. I think that's probably the 2 key ways to balance Spike a little bit more. So next up on the nerf wish list, we have Shelly. I feel like a broken record right now. She's been the best brawler in the game for a very long time, and it's pretty evident right now. They've nerfed her shell shock, they've nerfed her supercharge rate from super. I think we just need to nerf clay pigeons. I don't know how many times I need to say it. It's like the best gadget inside of a game. I think either you got to make it so it deals less damage, or it charges the super up less, or you could simply just reduce the duration so it's only like 3 seconds. So you have to be very precise with your aim, but definitely clay pigeons needs to be nerfed now. So next up, hopefully on the nerf wish list, we have Colette. So of course there's a few reasons why Colette is so strong. The new hypercharge, just dealing insane amounts of damage, of course, is just crazy in heist. I think one way to indirectly nerf this is by buffing the heist safe, which sounds quite funny to me, but that would be a nice way to actually nerf Colette, because then she won't be able to just have 4 supers on the safe and win the game. But I think one that actually is really under the radar, people don't talk about, is actually the gotcha gadget. It's a very strong gadget and very cheesy. You literally can't kill a Colette if she combines this with her mass tack style power. So I think reducing the amount of healing that you do with gotcha, so it's around 70%, 60% instead of the 80%, would be really nice, because as I said, she's unkillable with gotcha. Okay, so jumping into the last nerf I want to see, hopefully with the next set of balance changes, it is with Gray. So there's a few reasons why he's so toxic. The first one is to do with his super. He's starting to become even stronger right now because of course tanks pair up with his super so well. But how do you actually nerf this? I think obviously one way would make it so you charge your super a lot less frequently, but then that just makes Gray as a solo brawler really bad. I think probably the one way you need to nerf him definitely is with his walking Cane gadget. I think the range on it is really deceiving. It's actually a very long range, which it doesn't really need to be that, because I've explained in the past, it's like you get a free gene pool essentially with Gray. So for me, nerfing the range on the Walking Cane would be a nice first step, and then if he's a little bit more toxic, maybe address his super in a different way. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comment section below whether there's any buffs or nerfs you would like to see. I think some of these are just pretty self-explanatory. I'm not trying to kill any of the brawlers with the nerfs. I'm not trying to make some of these brawlers like absurdly OP with the buffs. So yeah, it's gonna be it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.